January always feels like both a really busy month and a really slow month. Here especially, the weather is very dark, it's very wet, and after all the excitement of the holidays, it definitely feels like one of those just buckle down and get through it type of months. So I was really looking forward to some good readathons to get me excited and to get me going. And luckily, Gabby Reads is running Winterween again this year, and that's exactly what I was looking for. While I'm not a big horror fan, I tend to be a bit of a wuss when it comes to truly scary books and films. I am definitely a spooky monster season all year round type of girl, and that's exactly what this round is. The first book, the book that gives me my vampire prompt and also all that general vampire theming for the readathon, is The Fox and the Devil by Kiersten White. This is actually an arc that's coming out in a couple of months, and I've relatively recently, back in October, read a vampire book by Kiersten White, her Dracula retelling Lucy Undying. I absolutely adored elements of it and was really disappointed in others, so I am hoping that this is going to be something that balances out and I end up really enjoying. This is a sapphic romance about a vampire hunter's daughter who stumbles across an actual vampire while she is hunting a serial killer. The next book I have on my TBR is one that's been here for a while, and it is Hemlock and Silver by Kingfisher. Kingfisher is one of my auto-buy pre-order authors, and I just haven't got to this one yet, but I'm very excited. It is, as far as I know, her take on a dark fairy tale version of Snow White. And while I don't usually show off the physical editions here, I just wanted to show you how beautiful this edition is. It has these gorgeous end papers here and this beautiful greeny olive foiled cover. I don't usually take the dust jackets off my books, but in this case I might have to make an exception. One that I'm probably going to start with, because it is a library book, is The House Saphir by Marissa Meyer. This is a dark YA Bluebeard retelling that I've been seeing everywhere and wasn't really particularly keen to pick up, but when I saw it in the library I actually read the back copy and was really interested. I really enjoyed Marissa Meyer's Cinder retellings, so I have high hopes for this one. And also, this is another edition that is utterly gorgeous. We've got the beautiful cover with the foiling, and look at those sprayed edges. This is the one that I'm going to read first, and I'll let you know how I get on with it. I'm not sure how well the foiling on this is showing up on camera, so I might just actually put the cover here for you instead. But again, just look at how pretty it is. Look at how pretty it is. I think I'm around about the 40% mark, and I'm actually really enjoying it. This is about Mallory and her sister. They have witchy powers, but they're also con artists who do fake seances. They sell, you know, feathers off mythical birds to kind of tourists, that sort of thing. And recently Mallory has been doing tours of the city house of the Saphir family, or their ancestor is known as Bluebeard, Count Blue, and he murdered his wives. On tonight's tour, when the book starts, she is unwittingly giving the tour to two undercover detectives. So when they go to arrest her for confidence fraud, it turns out that the third person on the tour is our man Saphir, the great-great-great-grandson of Bluebeard. He is living on the family's estate out of town, and they are recently having problems with the Count's ghost maliciously and malevolently haunting the place. So he hires Mallory and her sister to go with him to the estate, House Saphir, and to exorcise the ghost. Now, Mallory and Anise, her sister, accidentally bring with them the ghost of Trifine, the Count's first wife, and when they get to the manor they find that the other two brides that were killed are also haunting the estate, but not in a malevolent way. So we now have Mallory exploring the house, trying to balance, I guess, the fact that she doesn't have the ability to exorcise this ghost with putting on enough of a show that she can get the payment they've been promised. I'm really enjoying the setting. I love the house. The descriptions of it are absolutely stunning, and it definitely has that abandoned sensibility. Although Armand is obviously very rich and he has a small staff, the house has been being haunted for about 7 years now, and gradually the staff they've fled. We also have some kind of unique French folklore monsters that are turning up, I assume drawn in by the Count's ghost. And again, that just adds some really nice elements that I haven't seen before, monsters I haven't heard of. I'm really enjoying although it's a fantasy France, you can tell although it's a very fantasy version of France, I feel like the research that Meyer did into the folklore aspects, although she's repackaging it to suit the story, I think it comes through really well. I'm really enjoying that. It's not there's a lot of things here I haven't seen before, and it's a fun experience to uncover them. Sometimes I feel like YA horror, YA gothic always feels a little lackluster because you can't go as dark as you could in an adult fantasy. She's managed to get some darker themes into the YA story, but I'm really enjoying that balance. There are some really nice descriptive moments, but the book itself feels very pacey. We're focused more on the characters than on description and setting and writing. But at the same time, we are getting that darkness, that slightly creepiness, the lushness that you get in gothic writing. Sometimes adult, really gothic books, especially really gothic historical books, can be a little bit harder to get into. This balances those two things nicely. It's giving you the gothic vibes, the gothic experience, but in a really easy to read, accessible way. So I'm having a good time with it. Usually with these kind of books, I always end up coming out of the book and going, I would have liked if it was just a little bit darker, if it went just a little bit harder, especially when they are YA. But this one actually, I quite enjoy the tone. It's a little bit not as chilling as I would have liked, but we are getting quite a lot of kind of adventure in the story, a lot of action, and the protagonists are really enjoyable to watch. I've been reading bits of it by audio and bits of it on the paperback, and to be honest, I'm probably going to stick with the paperback because the issue that I'm having with the audio, I don't know if it's the narrator, if it's fair to judge them, but we have an American accented narrator doing characters that are in a fantasy France. And usually that would be fine, but the narrator also has, I don't know, a really modern way of speaking, a really modern kind of cadence to their tone, their inflection. She feels like a modern day teenage girl that would hang out at a mall. And so when you're having these moments in this gothic mansion, I don't know, there's just something about the voice that doesn't feel like the two mesh together. I don't know whether an older narrator, even though it's a younger character, whether going with a slightly older voice might have helped, or whether that's to do with accent, or whether it just is personality. It didn't work for me, or isn't working for me the way I would like it to. So I think I'm going to focus on my paper copy more as I go forward. The House Saphir is finished, and I had a lot of fun with this one. There was a lot of action, a lot of adventure. I really enjoyed all of the folklore elements, all the paranormal, occult angle, the really gothic vibes that this one pulled in. It reads as really good YA, and probably in that really upper YA category. The romance is still quite sweet, there's no real spice to it. The darkness, I mean, it's a dark story, you're doing a Bluebeard retelling, there's going to be elements of violence and of darkness in terms of the themes. In terms of the actual actions, I don't know that it's as dark as it would be if it was an adult novel, but I definitely feel that it's bridging that divide. I really liked it as a Bluebeard retelling. It's not something I can think off the top of my head that I've seen very often. I imagine it's one that's quite hard to do because so much of it is in the backstory. The only other one I have read was The Seventh Bride by T. Kingfisher, and while I loved that, she did add in some other elements to flesh it out. This one feels more purely Bluebeard, and obviously we're using the idea of his descendants to create the plot rather than it being set during the killer's lifetime. But I thought it really worked. I really liked the characters. I loved the sister dynamic, what we got to see of them in flashbacks as children, what we get to see of them in the present day felt really believable. They were definitely each other's priority throughout. Yes, obviously Armand comes in and there's a bit of romance there, but I never felt that the sister bond was suffering because of the romance. I loved the bride's ghost that we saw. I thought they were fun characters, not particularly fleshed out, but that makes sense. They feel a little bit like caricatures maybe of the people they once were, and whether that's intentional or not, it added a comedy element, a bit of a lighter moment. It stopped it being too weighed down in tragedy and sorrow, which again makes sense for a YA novel, just to touch on the darker themes but not, you know, wallow in them. Is it super scary? Definitely not, but it was very gothic. It had those vibes and I had a really good time with it. Hemlock and Silver is a really good T. Kingfisher book, but it's probably not my favourite T. Kingfisher book. It does a lot of things really well, and it definitely has a lot of tropes and themes and similarities to other Kingfisher books. If you've enjoyed that and you enjoy Kingfisher as a writer in general the way I do, then you're definitely going to enjoy this one. It is a dark Snow White retelling, but the Snow White aspect almost feels like it's happening in the background of the story, whereas Kingfisher's original characters are taking the forefront. We follow Anya, who is a healer. She specialises in curing poisonings, and she's been summoned to the king's out-of-city estate to treat his daughter Snow, a 12-year-old who is showing symptoms of poisoning or illness that no one can find the solution to. It has a brilliant first line. "I had just taken poison when the king arrived to inform me that he had murdered his wife." So while obviously this is Kingfisher putting her twist on Snow White and we have all the elements from a Snow White retelling, there are also things that I think are purely Kingfisher in this that I enjoyed seeing pop up. First is obviously Anya. She is very much a T. Kingfisher protagonist. I think a protagonist that we have seen before, but I do enjoy. She is a woman in her mid-30s. She's very tall, she's quite heavy. She's also very practical, very focused on her career or her interests. With Anya, it is the poisons. Although she's a healer, she makes a real point of saying that for her, the joy and the point of it isn't so much to treat patients. Yes, patients are there and it's not that she doesn't like people. She does. You see at moments when she unfortunately fails, you do see that she cares about her patients, but she's far more invested in solving the mysteries of these poisons than she is necessarily treating the patients. She has a little bit of a socially awkward element to her, as well as feeling really down to earth, really grounded and very practical. To a lesser extent, some of the things that I definitely think I've seen before in Kingfisher is the desert setting. That's something I remember seeing in Snake Eater earlier this year, and I think maybe in the Paladin's books is the way she looks at religion, and especially what I would think of as small gods. That plays a big part in this as well. We have Saint Adar and Saint Ren, Saint whatever, and all these gods have those very animalistic elements. It feels very the way in older medicines they thought that what a plant looked like had something to do with how it healed. That then seems to carry through into this and how they see their saints. Saint Ren is prayed to at death because they have a tradition of placing the ashes in birdhouses, and as the wind gradually dispels the ashes, that determines the period of mourning. So then birds become related to death. And I thought that was really interesting, it was really nice. I really love the different ways Kingfisher comes back and creates religions and looks at religions in interesting ways, and this definitely happens here. Similarly, there's a lot in here about plants and herbology. Anya is a poisons expert, so plants are very important to her life, and that reminded me a little bit of Bryony and Rosie's, where we had a gardener. I definitely think that plants and gardening and all of the associated crafts that you can do with those are something that the author's interest really comes through in this and in other books. In terms of Winterween, I did think that this was going to be the least horror-y book I had on my TBR. If I'm completely honest, I wasn't really sure it fit at all, but I've really been wanting to read it. I pre-ordered it. It's been on my shelf since, I want to say September or October, and I really wanted to get to it. So it fit the book from 2025 prompt, and technically it fits the red on the cover prompt as well. So I was working it in either way, but it fit even more than I thought it would, because although I wouldn't say this is a horror, I would say it's more of a dark fairy tale. It's definitely got some eerie moments. The silver element we talk about is mirrors. Obviously Snow White, the mirror is a very important part of the story. We talk about mirror worlds and going through the mirror into another kind of reality. There was a really, really great scene in this where Anya is lying in her bed in her room. It's dark and she is sure that she sees someone kind of hovering over her bed, and we have that great moment where, like you do when you suddenly get that sensation there's someone in the room with you, she freezes, she debates, should she move, should she not, if she closes her eyes will the problem go away, making sure that you're all tucked in under the cover so nothing can grab you. It was really good. It probably helped that at that point I was listening to this as an audiobook and I was lying in my own bed. I was definitely like, okay, no, I need to listen to this tomorrow morning, or I need to pick up the physical book tomorrow. I can't keep listening to this in the dark. That moment was really chilling and really fun. But overall, I wouldn't say the book is scary. I think that was the only moment that felt truly kind of like creepy. The rest of it is a bit more of an adventure, and the dark aspect comes more in the themes. Obviously we're talking about, there's a lot of death and murder, and specifically we're looking at things that have happened to children, so it's quite dark thematically. But other than a couple of specific moments, I wouldn't say it was a scary book. I think my favourite scary Kingfisher is still going to be The Hollow Places, but I did enjoy this one, and it was really nice to see her going back to those fairy tale roots. My first tea Kingfishers were back when she had indie published Bryony and Roses and The Raven and the Reindeer. It was really nice to see her going back to re-examine some of the darker horror aspects that exist in fairy tales. I'm sitting at about the quarter of The Fox and the Devil, and I'm having a really good time with that. I'm saying that so quietly because like as if it can hear me, and I feel it's gonna trick me, but I'm having a really, really good time with it. The book starts us off in Amsterdam in the very late 1800s, and we're following Annika van Helsing. She's investigating a brutal, mysterious murder scene. The bit of the book that I've read so far definitely gives me, I would say it feels more like a Sherlock Holmes story than it feels like a vampire story at the moment. There are some mysterious moments, but we could also be looking at any kind of vaguely supernatural story, or even just quite a gothic detective story, I think, in this moment. There is some curiosities about the killing, how specifically it's happened, but with still quite a chunk of the book to go, I think an author could write that into some kind of real world scenario. So other than that Van Helsing connection, it's more just a gothic historical at the moment, and I'm loving that. The setting, both the time setting and the location. In the part that I've read, we've had Amsterdam and we've had Budapest, and both those cities have been so beautifully described, so intricately and lushly painted. In very broad strokes, I will say it's not a super descriptive novel, but the description we do get paints a very vivid picture of the setting specifically. I'm really liking Annika, I think that's how you pronounce her name, as a character. She's very practical, very driven. She's determined to solve both these mysteries and the connection she feels they have to her father's murder. She feels exactly like the kind of detective you would get in this. She's a very Sherlockian type of character. And I read Kiersten White's previous vampire book, Lucy Undying, for my Queer Vampires vlog. And I think actually I started out not sure. It grew on me throughout. I ended up being convinced that it was going to be at least a 4, if not a 5-star. Got to about just after the halfway mark, and it just slid down in a disappointing splodge right down to becoming like a 3 by the time I rated it, and that was a begrudging 3. that I felt I couldn't rate it lower because of the bits I'd enjoyed, but by that point I was so irritated with the book I really nearly DNF'd it because it had such a sink. And I'm really enjoying this one, but I'm also really apprehensive because I'm aware that I was so enjoying and so optimistic about Lucy Undying. And I'm just very tentative and very like cautious. I don't want to get myself too excited, too stoked up on this too early in case it all turns around and ends in disappointment. But at the moment I'm having a good time with it. We really have only seen Annika doing a little bit of investigating. We've got to see her pulling in some different allies that are going to help her with that. There is a mysterious woman that turned up at her father's murder, who she now sees in some of the crime scene photographs. There's definitely a connection between them there. She kind of talks about this woman as being the love of her life. And now we're in, again, a sort of Sherlock Moriarty type race against each other, dropping hints, dropping letters, dropping clues, journey around Europe as Annika tries to catch Diavola, and Diavola leaves her these letters and clues and tries to encourage her to play the game. But I'm expecting and hoping that the vampire aspect is going to become more prevalent as we go through the story. So I think this is me. I think I've found a Kiersten White novel that I can unequivocally be like, yes, I really enjoyed this book. Now, is it a 5-star? No, it's not. It's probably around a 4 though, and considering the up and down and roundabout and trauma I had coming out of Lucy Undying, this is really redemptive in terms of this author for me. I love her concepts. I've heard so many of her books that sound like things I really want to read, and I Darken and then Lucy Undying have been a bit hit and miss. I've been put off by picking up the actual books themselves. I did not realise until I was looking through the other books by this author page in the book. Woofed. She definitely has a really big back catalogue of books that I would quite like to dip into. Some of them sound really my thing. The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, I remember coming out and I didn't want to touch it because I thought this will disappoint me. The other one I'm tempted to pick up is that she seems to have a middle grade series set at like a magical theme park or a gothic theme park, I don't really know. And that is definitely kind of calling my name a bit. I still always think of March as being middle grade March, and I don't pick up a lot of middle grade throughout the year, but maybe this would be something I should look into. So if you've read either of these, then obviously this is me saying, let me know. But for The Fox and the Devil, I had a really good time with it. It definitely hits, I feel like if you're looking for something to compare it to, then although we have Van Helsing, he's there for name only. The loosey-goosey vampire thing is there only. It goes far more with the idea of folklore vampires and different types of vampire, more realistic takes on kind of old world history than it does on Dracula, the book. However, if you were looking for a kind of classic comparison, I think this owes far more to Sherlock Holmes than it does to Dracula. That's definitely the vibe I get from Annika. She had that Sherlockian attitude, that really intelligent detective that's head and tails above everyone else, but softened so that she's not an absolute about it. She's a likeable character while having all those Sherlock style traits. There was so much going on in it, the historical elements, the plot, the chase, the mystery. What I think, if I was looking for something, again, maybe not a classic, but something to compare this to give you a reference, is Stranger Beasts by Susan Morris that came out last year. This feels in the vein of that. Maybe something that is a more adult, more grown-up version of Stalking Jack the Ripper. Maybe a more serious, more gothic take on the Parasol Protectorate. It's a really well-paced book, I felt, which is what I struggled with so much in Lucy Undying. This, I feel the pacing is much steadier. One, my enjoyment was much steadier. I was captivated very early on, and it kind of kept my interest throughout, but also the actual pacing of the book, I didn't feel that there were moments where we were really dragging the plot along. I didn't feel there were moments where everything was happening too fast just to get from point A to point B. It felt very, very well paced, very well balanced in terms of the characters versus the plot versus the mystery. The end does get a little bit all the moving parts, but that's because of the nature of the story and you need that. There were a couple of reveals that I don't know that we needed. I think they came a little out of left field, but overall it really worked for me. While the mystery and all that is super important, and for me personally, the idea of there being a sapphic romance in it was a huge draw, those actually coming out of it aren't the things that I think I'll remember that I enjoyed the most. The vibes were impeccable, and I don't like to recommend a book entirely on vibes because you're not going to enjoy it just because the vibes are right. You have to have the plot and the characters, but the vibes in this one were so good. I think gothic is such a hard thing to get right without just being pretentious or just too horror-y, or I don't know. This one just hit that that gothic tone without traipsing into the classic gothic moments. Like, we didn't have to do the isolated manor house, the women running down the corridors in their long white dresses. We didn't have to have those, but because of the topic, because of the tone, I think Kiersten White was really unflinching in the really dark moments in this. And yes, I suppose those are the horror moments, the deaths, but they also were so clearly part of the crime novel aspect that they didn't feel like horror and gore for horror and gore's sake. I also adored the settings. I said right at the start that I loved the historical depiction of Amsterdam we saw, and the book really jet sets us throughout Europe. We see lots of different cities, and because of the nature of because of a conceit in the plot, we're seeing these cities each as they hit a really up and coming moment, culminating in the Paris exhibition in 1900. And Kiersten White did a really, really good job of making all of the cities we visit feel completely unique. They didn't feel like we were just rehashing the same location, but they were also just really vividly described, really beautifully presented. She paints you enough of a picture that these settings really come to life. Paris is different from Amsterdam, is different from Budapest. When they go to the Greek island of Lesbos, again, it has a very different feel to it. A setting was something that she just really nailed in this one. It's not usually something that I particularly pull from a book that I notice, that I comment on, but in this one it just felt so well done and it really caught my attention. And then I think the final thing, if I was going to be picking things from this book that I'm just going to really remember, one of the absolute highlights in this was the mother-daughter relationship for me. And that's so strange because honestly, Annika's mother isn't in it very often. She doesn't really play a massive part in the plot. There's no moment where you think she's the driving force of any event. She's kind of just there, and as I said, not even there that often, but the relationship between Annika and her mother is threaded throughout the book so beautifully. It's such an important part of Annika's character, of her realizations, of her development, especially in the back end of the book. This gave you a really good look at Annika and her almost self-destructive need to prove herself to her dead father, but her father that was never really interested in her to begin with. She's desperately trying to prove her worth to Van Helsing. She's desperately trying to live up to his memory, despite the fact that he's been so neglectful when he was alive. She can't see that through her grief and through her memories. And then her mother, she, I think, sort of not looks down on, but feels pity for. She feels like she has to look after her mother. But we also, over the course of the novel, see how her mother has actually been looking after her, how her mother has always been there for her, how that is its strength all on its own, and how the two of them kind of reconcile the truth about the dynamic that their family had, the dynamic between her parents that Annika never saw or never appreciated, and how that was influenced by Annika and her brother. It's a really interesting family dynamic that we get to see without ever actually seeing all three of these characters in a room together. We're looking at a grown woman, still trying to live up for still trying to get that parental approval, but then seeing and appreciating the parent that is left behind. It's not a big part of the story, but for me, it was something that I just really enjoyed. I really liked seeing. And now I don't know that I have time to finish another book before the end of Winterween, but I probably have enough time to make a start on one and then just let it run over past the end of the readathon. So since I have one on my NetGalley shelf on my TBR that I think would fit really well, I'm just going to go for it. This is going to be Wolfwood by T. Kingfisher, so the second T. Kingfisher of the vlog, but it's only about 180 pages, so I don't know, maybe might finish it by the end of the week. But Wolfworm was a really great pick for the last book. The other 3 books that I've read, while they were all just touching on that horror genre, I feel like maybe they were more paranormal. They were dipping their toe into some spooky themes, some mild horror, but they weren't really getting that in there. And Wolfworm solved that problem right up. This is the most serious T. Kingfisher book that I've read. It's up there closer to The Hollow Places, and I suspect if I'd read it somewhere like The Twisted Ones, it's definitely firmly in the horror category rather than some of her books like Hemlock and Silver have darker elements, but they're more dark fantasy. This definitely gave me the horror vibes. It's a historical novel set in Appalachia. We follow our main character Sonia. She in the past has been an illustrator for her father, who was a naturalist, but since his death she's been struggling to make ends meet as a teacher in a girls' boarding school. So when the reclusive Dr. Halder, another naturalist, is searching for a young illustrator to come to his secluded house and work on documenting his collection for an upcoming book, she travels to his home. We get some beautiful setting here. The climate and the landscape of Appalachia really comes through in T. Kingfisher's writing. A weight that almost bears down on you when you combine the weather, the unsettling nature of Halder's research, the mystery of his missing previous assistant, and just the general vibes that Kingfisher brings to this one. It all combines really nicely and just feels just, and even before the real mystery of the book, the real drama, the real horror starts, there is this creeping unsettlingness to the story that I really enjoyed. We don't get as much of the trademark Kingfisher humour in this one. It does feel more serious, but that suits the tone. Our protagonist is a little bit more recalcitrant. She's a little bit maybe more sheltered, a little less ballsy and go get them as some of T. Kingfisher's other female protagonists, but I really enjoyed Sonia as a character. Despite having some questions about Halder's previous assistant, his missing wife, about the rumours that she's heard of devils and blood thieves in the area, Sonia's really not sticking her neck out. She's not poking her nose into mysteries. She's very much a minding her own business type of person. And I think that makes it even more realistic when she falls into the horrors that she falls into. She's not a character that is necessarily investigating this mystery. It pings her interest and she does ask a couple of questions, which obviously let us get to know some of the supporting characters who I really enjoyed, who is Halder's cook slash housekeeper and her husband, and then we have a local healer, a kind of a herb woman, and both of them give Sonia bits of information about what maybe happened to Halder's wife, but she's not looking to solve the mystery, and I think that's very crucial in the way that the story plays out. We do feel that she is drawn into this almost completely against her will, and I think that makes it not only feel more believable, but it adds a nice echo to when she does uncover the mystery. We find out what has been going on with Halder's experiments, and that feeling of isolation, of inevitability, of choices being taken from you all plays out in the finale in a way which I felt like was a nice echo of Sonia's situation at the beginning of the novel, and it really showed her growth as a character in the way that she had to pick herself up, she had to pull herself together and do what she had to do. You saw that narrative arc of her growth come through really nicely. There's very little you can say without giving this away. The blurb on the back and what I've just told you is essentially as much as you can get before we start getting into spoiler territory. But I do not think would be suitable if you have any qualms, any issues around bugs. I personally don't think I have any problems with insects, and there were a few moments in this one where I physically recoiled from my e-reader. I winced, I skimmed, I pulled myself together, I went back and reread it. There are some really, I don't know that they're super gory, they're just really disturbing scenes. And if you have issues with insects, with parasites, with larvae, with maggots, any of that sort of thing, then this book really might not be for you. It does also have some elements of body horror, and I'm fairly certain you can see where all this is going, but yeah, it's definitely one that you want to consider if you like horror before you dip into it. If you're a Kingfisher fan that has come in through Sword Heart, through her Paladin series, or any of her more lighter fantasy books, do your research before you pick this up. It's not violent, I wouldn't say. It's not super gory. It is just mostly unsettling, and definitely one that will leave your skin crawling. I had a really fun week for Winterween this year. It's the first year that I've taken part, and it's been a really nice break after reading so many cozy stories at the end of December, after dipping into some comfort rereads in that awkward intermediary period where I didn't want to start my 2026 books, but I had firmly finished my 2025 ones. This was a really nice change of pace to go for something a little bit darker and a little bit grittier. I think I found a really good batch, and more than I thought would hit that kind of bonus vampire theme. Let me know if you are interested in any of the books I've talked about here. Let me know if you think you'll be picking up Wolfworm. And if not, let me know what your favourite vampire book you've read recently is. I really appreciate any subscriptions to the channel, any likes in the video, and I really hope that I'm going to see you in the next one. Goodbye.